Do you want to do it?
Let's do it together.
All right.
Shall we?
Fox News is projecting. He is within 3 of becoming the president of the United States. And you can imagine the electric bolt that just went through the Civic Center there in West Palm Beach.
Yeah, and I'm sure that he wants to be, if he can,
There
get
it
to
is.
somewhere at 270 where they're celebrating there, that he can talk about that. So we will await hearing from him there.
You know, when we were playing with the maps and everyone did it, the closest or easiest path for Trump was North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania. He's got them all now.
Yeah, he has. I mean, in Pennsylvania, obviously, he had this flip of key states in 2016. They fell through his fingers again in 2020. And now it looks like he has put together what he needed to do to win something back like Pennsylvania. It is the big prize. And all of these pathway scenarios that we've done on the big board and everywhere else that we've calculated, those 19 electoral votes in Pennsylvania, where the vice president made 5 stops on the last final day of campaigning, because everybody knows how critical that Keystone State is. We now put it in the column for President Trump, and we await to hear from him as well.
And you know, the 2 other blue wall states that are still out there, there's a lot of vote that's left to be counted in Michigan. They're only at 63%. But Trump is ahead by 6 points. And then in Wisconsin, where there's still 14% of the vote to come in, he's ahead by 4.
It's over.
So, Marie, what does this tell you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can now start the postmortems, Richard. I mean, look, I think I will say.
Well, if he wins Alaska, he goes.
I will say, we were talking about this in the break. There are a lot of people in this country who are really scared about this outcome. And I'm not fear mongering. I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse. A lot of things Donald Trump said on this campaign are scary to a lot of Americans. And I heard a lot over the last 4 years of criticism that Republicans didn't think Joe Biden brought the country together enough and that he wasn't a unifier. And Donald Trump, I think, will feel very emboldened by what has happened. His instinct is not unifying people. His instinct is usually division. And I will be very curious to see what he says when he comes onto the stage tonight.
I am too, but do you take any comfort in, we're still waiting, there are numbers that still have to happen, but when he won in 2016, there were all of these folks saying, you got to put Hillary Clinton in jail. You got to try her. You got to lock her up. And he very, clearly signaled that is not going to be good for the country. We're going to shut that stuff down.
What's been so concerning for Democrats this cycle is that Trump has gotten worse in his language about using law enforcement to go after his political enemies. He talks about Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff as the enemy of the state. He talks about using law enforcement in a very aggressive way. An enemies list. I mean, a lot of the guardrails that were on the first Trump term aren't there anymore. And he's talking much more aggressively, which, agree or disagree, that's what scares a lot of Americans today.
I see some skepticism on.
I'm giving you the perspective from Democrats
yes,
tonight.
Yes.
Like that is what a lot of Americans.
I was just going to say, just to tee up Mary Catherine Ham, because I did the Trump campaign in 2016, and then I became the White House correspondent, and people were saying, he's going to do this, he's going to do that, he's going to do the other thing. First 2 years of his presidency, he was on defense the entire time against the New York Times, against the Washington Post, against special counsels, against everybody who had a grievance against Trump that kept them completely off balance. And I would expect that that's going to be exactly what happens again. Particularly if Democrats win back control of the House, I think it'll be investigate Trump. Yes. The press is going to go after him because they know, they buy ink by the barrel, to quote the old phrase, and they know that they'll sell newspapers and they'll get viewers to cable news if they just go after Trump full speed for the next 4 years. Should he win?
First thing out the gate was Russiagate, which was a misuse of the intelligence community and a fraud perpetrated on the American people and against Donald Trump. That was a problem. Okay. So this is when you talk about concerns about Donald Trump, which I share with you, some of them. Democrats often assume that their noses are clean on this front. Meanwhile, you've got the Attorney General of Arizona investigating Donald Trump's political rhetoric on the trail as a death threat. You've got Merchan talking about when he can put him in jail. You got Bannon, who just came out of jail, right? So these are all uses of the justice system in a similar way. And I just think when you're talking, these are parts of the Democratic coalition, right? Working class folks, minorities, suburban women. They couldn't reach them despite what they say is one of the worst candidates in the history of the United States. What does that mean about how you're speaking to those parts of your coalition? How do you need to do it better? It felt to me one note and condescending as one of the people who ostensibly you were trying to reach.
Well, and it was interesting too to watch the language when the really heavy hitters, the super popular, the Obamas came out and joined on the campaign trail, and we all remember these comments that came from President Obama, especially when he addressed black men specifically. And then you had someone, Stephen A. Smith, who was no Trump fan at all, come out and say that did not land well. It did feel preachy, and it's not going to hit well with all of these different voters that you're trying to reach. I mean, if you're going to talk about messaging, that's part of the conversation.
I think we can say this. We can litigate how we got to this moment, but we're here. And the truth of the matter is that I think everybody on this panel can agree that we are a divided country. We are literally a 50-50 country. Half of to Marie's point, there are a lot of people tomorrow are going to wake up in fear, right? There are a lot of people that are going to wake up and be very happy. And I think it's on the new president of the United States to say, how do I actually bring this country together? Part of that is, even if the media is attacking me, I have to still uphold the First Amendment, because I can't attack journalists by name, right? I have to uphold, which is what we've seen this individual do.
Well, you can attack journalists by name. You can't shut their journalism down, but
sure. But when you attack a journalist by name, it's what comes after that, because when you do it, you can spark other things. Other things can happen as a result of that. The point I'm trying to make here is, I think it's upon Donald Trump, as now a second-term president, knowing that he cannot run for re-election. If it were me and I were him, I would say, how do I bring this country together? How do I bring people together? And how do I say, don't fear me? Let's actually work together to make this country great.
And whoever ultimately wins needs to share that message.
Well, we'll see if that happens. Hold that thought for just a minute, just before we go to Alexis McAdams, who's at the Trump headquarters and can describe what's going on there. We've just been getting a tranche of results in from Nevada. 75% of the vote counted. Donald Trump leads Harris by 4 points. So the Silver State is tilting at the moment in his direction as well. Okay, let's go to Alexis McAdams. She is at Trump headquarters at the Civic Center there in Florida. What's the atmosphere like?
Well, the atmosphere has really taken off here on the ground. The crowd has grown to the thousands. This place is now jammed, and they're all watching Fox News Channel as we're calling those other key states like Pennsylvania for the former president. They erupted here on the ground, and that was the state, right, that was supposed to be the nail biter. That was the one that people weren't sure about. He got Florida, he got Texas. They were all like, okay, what's next? And then this happened. So I do have to say, I'm not a political expert, but I've been on the politics trail. I've gone all over on the campaign trail, and I've never seen crowds go for former President Trump, no matter where I was. These people were waiting for hours, and then I would think, wow, he's really doing well in this state, and then I would
not only win the Electoral College, but he will win by a substantial margin the popular vote.
Right. I'm going to make a counterintuitive point for my Democrat friends, but I had hoped for a decisive victory for whoever won, because I think that's good for public trust. And I think actually matching Electoral College and popular vote is good for public trust and for understanding how this went down, so we don't have to have a giant fight about it after the fact or a constitutional crisis. Okay, so that's one. I know this is not how we wanted to come about it for you guys. However, there's something about the cross-seating of these new coalitions that is interesting, that I think can bring about unity, because Trump's Republican Party looks more like a pro-labor Democratic Party with a working class and minority chunk of it than it used to. These parties are moving in different directions. You're gaining some of these Republican women. Some of them crossed over. Some of the aggrieved Republicans. Some of them left the party like 4 years ago. So I think there are maybe ways in which we can find common ground. I would also say that this election might blow up the idea of like the conventional wisdom narratives, and that people are going to be looking for news stories in different places, podcasts among them, and they are not going to be as easily discounted because a lot of the things that people were told on many other networks and in many newspapers were incorrect in huge ways once again.
And you have to give credit, since you're giving credit to Vice President Harris, you have to give credit to President Trump and his campaign. They actually ran in big ways a very smart and manifestly successful campaign, right? They went places, they decided, let's lean into the gender gap. If they're going to be the party of women, let's be the party of men in some ways. Let's go to those spaces and win those votes. Let's take a gamble in a way that Republicans have not ever been able to do and go make a real play for people of color. And they did it, and they succeeded at it in a large way. And, you know, I was talking about the race earlier, and people sitting around this table who know me know that I have never been a big Trump guy in a lot of ways. But someone was asking me about the campaign. We were talking about the McDonald's moment, and then I chimed in with the garbage truck moment. And I actually smiled, and I thought back. I was like, wow. 4 years ago, the 2020 campaign did not have a lot of natural smile moments. For the Trump campaign and for the country, it was a very dark time. Trump, I think, was humanized in several ways down the home stretch of this campaign. That was very helpful to him. Whether the other side wants to admit it or not, he looked like he was having fun. And I think that might have played a role here, especially in the type of margin he's likely to end up with.
Well, and even Doug Emhoff, the vice president's husband, said they are making it about a campaign about fun, and that he worried that would attract young men and younger people to something that he didn't feel substantively was the right place for them. But even he, too, talked about that campaign looks like it's having more fun. They're trying to attract you with the idea of fun.
But Marie, just in the minute that we have left in this hour, speak to this idea that the Democratic and Republican parties have fundamentally flipped, and that the Republican Party is now the party of working Americans, even though the union leadership may still be on the side of the Democratic Party. The rank and file are with the Democrats now.
Well, now,
Are with the Republicans.
well, now Donald Trump has to put his money where his mouth is, right? He has to enact policies that help.
But how did you get to this point?
I mean, I think there's a million reasons. I think that's been a long time coming. I don't disagree with Guy that Trump ran a campaign that tapped into something. It was a phenomenon. The McDonald's stunt was brilliant. It was just it was so crazy because you were watching him do that and then get on stage and call supporters of Kamala Harris scum. And so it was like he had both sides to the campaign. And I kept thinking the American people would see the nasty one. And it turns out they did, and they didn't care.
And I would add to what Marie said. I do think there was a time, the part of the Democratic Party's problem when Trump is on the ballot, is they spend too much time talking about Trump and not enough time talking about what they want to do to move the country forward.
And that is. We're just about to hit 2 a.m. here on the East Coast, and Fox News has called the race for the White House for former President Donald Trump.
Trump securing more than 270 of the electoral votes needed, with Fox News predicting wins in Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, as well as Wisconsin. Still out there, Arizona, Nevada, and Alaska, and Michigan, which is counting votes like molasses at a pace that I have not seen be this slow for Michigan. Wayne County, still a majority of the vote is out there. So we don't know which way that is going to go, but it's clear that the blue wall crumbled. We're waiting for the former president, the president-elect now, although not official, to speak at his campaign headquarters shortly.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of celebrations down there tonight as various states have come in. It was a plotting process. We did think we'd probably have North Carolina, Georgia earlier than we did, but those have been called. The big turn of the night, of course, came when Pennsylvania landed in the Trump column. And then after that, it was Wisconsin, that break, as you said, breaking apart of the blue wall. Something that Trump had done in 2016, lost in 2020, has now flipped back, it appears now. In 2024, building those places that he needed to get past 270. A lot of celebrations there, but what they're really waiting for is the man who was the 45th and now will be the 47th president of the United States to take to the stage.
And an interesting anecdote, when you look at the vote that came in Wisconsin for the last several elections, Door County has gotten it right, and the folks there voted for the person who eventually won the state. Door County voted for Kamala Harris, and Donald Trump now is projected to win the state of Wisconsin. So Door County's record has been broken.
Yes, and there are all kinds of bellwethers and things that we try to look at as we're going into these evenings, and we try to predict. And the early vote, listen, Republicans did much better than they've ever done before at turning out the early vote because President Trump, frankly, changed his message. The party changed their message. The RNC changed their message on getting folks to get out, bank those votes, take their early vote options. And there were questions leading in today whether that was taking away an attrition from their day of vote. They felt confident they still had day of vote to show up, and it turns out that's the case.
I'll be interested to see eventually when the Fox News voter analysis has been completely compiled, how much late-breaking men came out for Donald Trump after the Joe Rogan podcast, where he sat for 3 hours, and then Joe Rogan coming out and endorsing him. Mary Catherine Ham, what do you think?
I think the Joe Rogan endorsement, I wondered if it was like too close to election